support. Thank you very much.
All right. So we've talked about issuing security tokens, but one thing we haven't talked about yet is creating them. This next panel of ours will be tackling that topic. Presiding over that will be Jor Law of Verify Investor, one of the biggest players in, you guessed it, verifying investor accreditation status. You might have heard of this company too, because it was recently acquired for something of a kingly sum by T0. At any rate, I hope you all please join me in welcoming Jor and the rest of the panelists to the stage.
You got the whoopee cushion.
Yeah. We all have it.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is the highlight conference panel of the day. I can tell from the audience. Look, we have actually a really interesting topic. It's quite the rage these days, and it's how to tokenize securities. On the panel, we have really a group of folks that kind of do similar things, yet each one is actually a little bit different. So I'm going to do a quick intro in the interest of time to kind of the individuals, and then I'm going to give them an opportunity to talk about the companies that they're with. Because I think it's good to know where they're coming from. We're going to try to save some time for Q&A purposely. So to my left is Jamie. He's the president and co-founder of Securitize and a seed investor in Spice VC. He got into crypto a few years ago, so now he's a crypto mogul. Next to him is Deven, who's coming out of the closet as the co-founder of Polymath. He's formerly a private equity and venture capital investor at Goldman Sachs and Highland Capital. Next to him is Timo, who's co-founder and CIO at Swarm Fund, and previously was a fintech investor and board member in the world's largest private equity deals platform, Banker Bay. And then, last but certainly not least, is Alan, who's VP of Sales at StartEngine. He's responsible for business development. If you like everything you've seen today and everything about this conference and you want to be part of it, he's the guy you go talk to. So really quickly, guys, if you don't mind, and then me, I'm Jor Law. I just do advising in the securities token ecosystem. So I've helped a number of companies create their product or work on their strategy. So let's jump into your companies because they're all a little bit different from each other. Jamie, maybe you start and we'll just go down the line. What does Securitize do?
Sure, yeah, I feel it's sort of unfair as we go down the line.
We do everything better.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Just everybody down the line does everything better. I'm Jamie Finn with Securitize, as was already pointed out, and we focus on primary issuance and then managing compliance in the secondary market. So our very focus at this point is really deploying our digital securities protocol with a variety of different marketplaces and getting that thing up and running and hoping trading will start very soon.
Great. Deven with Polymath. And Polymath is a security token issuance platform. I think the one thing that we like or we're trying to do well is actually embed compliance and sort of embed compliance into a tradable token that can then integrate effectively with things like security token exchanges, other layers that are being built, and just the broad ecosystem as well.
Timo, Swarm, and we are a blockchain for co-investment and co-ownership of currently high-value assets. So one of the functions or use cases would be security token issuance, but that's not the only thing. I think that kind of sets us apart a little bit. And the way we look at the world is kind of, we came at it from a DAO perspective. So it's basically how do you make sure that people can co-invest and co-own assets and govern them and do that in a compliant way. So we built a fork off of Stellar and basically implemented our own chain. And that's kind of what we're running today.
Hi everyone, my name is Alan Jebsen with StartEngine. Hopefully you guys know a little bit about what we do. But we are an equity crowdfunding platform that has now moved into the security token offering space as well. We help entrepreneurs achieve their dreams. We help them raise capital through Regulation A+, Regulation crowdfunding, and Regulation D, 506C. Yeah.
Well, I mean, they help people achieve dreams, so.
That's right.
You know, who won't like that? So I've had the pleasure of working with all of them. They all kind of work with me or some of the companies that I've created. Let me kind of, just because I know sometimes it might sound similar when you go down the line, let me kind of explain what I think each one of them is myself, and they'll kill me later if I get it wrong. But they're all a little bit different, right? StartEngine is a crowdfunding portal. You can go, you can list your deal. They've got the technology and infrastructure for you to be able to list a deal and connect with investors through their portal. It's very interesting, right? Swarm Fund has its own blockchain that could be used to create tokenized securities. Polymath is, you know, I'd like to think of them as two things. One is a network of service providers that can help you tokenize the securities, and two is a tokenization technology. They are not what I would consider like a funding portal or, you know, true issuance platform. They provide the tools that could be utilized by any funding portal or issuance platform to create tokens, for example. And Securitize is kind of you know, built on Ethereum primarily at the moment, but they are a service where you can go and use their technology to essentially tokenize your own offering, host your own offering, almost like a white label service. So they all kind of do play similar functions, but they have different positions within each one, and that might be important to some of you guys who are trying to understand the nuances of each one as you ask questions later. So one of the questions I want to ask about are, what are some of the fundamental requirements of technology underlying security tokens? And Jamie, like maybe start with you and see how deep you get into it.
Well, yeah,
I know you've thought about this a lot.
Sure, yeah, we spent a lot of time on this topic. I mean, and kind of where we started with this is we initially launched Spice VC, so we kind of ran an issuance and understood it, and then we went and we tried to list Spice VC on Open Finance. And they came to us with a question and said, well, how many slots do we get and how many tokens can we trade? And we kind of looked at each other and we're like, what? What do you mean? Because we didn't really want to think of, you know, just exchange by exchange, right? And so when you talk about, you know, compliance and kind of these securities, you have to understand there's a lot of controls that have to be put in place. And so at the very, very high level, the most important thing here is transfer restriction and making sure that a digital security can't be transferred between the wrong people. And that's kind of the simplest way of looking at it. And then you get into nuances of, you know, funds versus real estate versus operating businesses, and there's a whole variety of rules. And so as you kind of go through that waterfall, I mean, I can bore you with the 72 different nuances of it, but at the end of the day, it's really understanding the type of business and then the type of investor and where they're coming from. And with that information, you're able to basically deploy a compliance solution for that.
Right, and then Timo, you know, you mentioned Stellar. You know, why would one consider something like a Stellar or another blockchain, you know, instead of like Ethereum? Like, what are some of the fundamental technological limitations to Ethereum that are causing some people to consider other chains?
It depends on what you're trying to achieve. I think the way we looked at it was, if we're going to, let's say, guarantee a compliant blockchain with built-in governance and actually shape it in a way so that it can accommodate a number of different types of organizations' requirements, we just saw that going all in on Ethereum was not the way to go for what we were trying to achieve. So we built it, you know, basically on a code. It's not a fork of the Stellar blockchain. It's a code fork. But you know, we see it more as this is a cross-chain phenomenon. So like end of the day, we'll have security tokens on Ethereum. When, you know, the 1400 comes out, that's great. You know, it's kind of in baking right now. We'll have Stellar security tokens and EOS and, you know, whatever else, right? So this is so the way we look at it is like the end game is going to be a cross-chain technology and an implementation of compliance and governance. That's where we will end up end of the day. But in order to accommodate for our own requirements and also some of the organizations we're looking at serving, then we said this is the best way to start.
Right. So Deven, coming to you for a little bit. I know Polymath is built on Ethereum, and publicly you guys tell people you guys are only on Ethereum at the moment. But I also know that you're always doing constant R&D, looking at your own chain, looking at other chains. What are some of the other chains that are interesting to you?
Sure. So I think Stellar is actually very interesting, and there's a fundamental architectural difference in Stellar and Ethereum. Ethereum is a full Turing complete sort of system, which you don't actually fully need for for securities. Whereas with something like Stellar, what you do is actually you just have a simple trading token that refers back to kind of an off-chain ecosystem that actually defines the rules, which I think is a really interesting way to do it. There's other things like RChain, which are very interesting, which let you create your own kind of shard of your own of a blockchain that lets you kind of define the rules and kind of the validators and the nodes in unique ways. So I think those are very interesting as well. And I think there's some challenges with having a fully public chain with all data on chain. Things like you have no idea where these transactions are being verified. You have no idea how the transaction verifiers are being compensated. If there's a transaction verifier somewhere, or a proof of work miner in North Korea that's profiting from a U.S. security token, that's probably not going to be super cool with kind of like FinCEN and the SEC as some of those things kind of become more well understood.
Jamie, this isn't a popular one lately, but Cardano.
Yeah.
Popular, but not often talked about in security tokens.
Yeah, I mean we've looked at a bunch of them as well, and I think Stellar with SEPA-weight implementing its transfer restrictions is a good start. Cardano, it would be pretty straightforward to implement everything. We've also looked at EOS and Neo. I think at the end of the day, you have to think about who the customer is, right? And who's the customer for this are, for the most part, the throughput isn't the main issue here, and which is kind of the argument for a lot of these other blockchains, right? It's really control and scale, right? And so what you want is something where there's wallets, where there's exchanges or marketplaces, where all the infrastructure is there and investors can actually use that infrastructure. I don't see that with the other chains yet. I think Stellar is probably the best suited thus far, and they've developed the most of it, but still, it just doesn't have the scale that Ethereum has.
Right. So we've talked a lot about technical foundations. Alan, can you maybe kind of go through like the other stuff that's needed, like what's needed to tokenize? It's not just choosing a chain, it's not just tokenizing. What else does someone have to think about?
Yeah, I think Jamie hit it on the head a few minutes ago about figuring out what are the compliance rules already in place, and if we are working with security tokens, how do we follow those rules? Just a few hours ago, I announced StartEngine's ERC 1450, which is our version of an ERC 20 smart contract made specifically for transactions between a person and a buyer and a seller in compliance with rules like 144A, transfer restrictions, and also speaking to a third party or a transfer agent that has recordship and ownership on a public market if you're raising capital or if you've issued securities to the public. These types of things have already been laid out for us from the 1934 Securities Act. It's up to StartEngine and each of the companies here to act accordingly, but building it and choosing the chain to make it the most efficient, I think is the question here, and that's what we're debating.
Yeah. So, I mean, is there a secret sauce in tokenizing securities? Can anyone do it themselves? Obviously, you guys all provide this service, but at some point you had to do it yourself. Why is this something that people shouldn't do themselves? Anyone? Timo?
I mean, come on, it's like, okay, I'm going to do an e-commerce business, and then I'm going to start by building a web server. That's kind of, if you roll back, you don't want to do that. And then, like, okay,
But
what's
you
my
could.
authentication and payment solution? And like, all these components have already been built. Like, why start over? So it's actually really complicated to do this on global level. Even now we're talking about like, Reg D and 144 and all the other stuff that's US specific. But to actually solve this, the compliance and governance and the implementation of security tokens at global scale, that's really hard. So, to do these things as a one-off activity is not economic, and you'll end up with a lot of deficiencies that a lot of the networks and providers and companies have already solved at a unit cost that's going to be much lower than you can ever achieve. So unless you have very, very, very specific requirements, you should probably just use a network or existing network or platform.
Yeah, I think everyone here, has taken at least months, if not, more than a year, with a whole team of developers and lawyers, et cetera, to build what they've built. You could build it yourself, but what you come up with wouldn't iterate to what they've already done typically.
Well, it depends on your core business too.
Yes.
I mean, if your core business is to become a financial services company that's doing this, then it might make sense to make that type of investment. And if your core business is e-commerce, it probably doesn't make sense.
Right. So, you announced 1450, there's 1410, 1411, 1400, there's 1404, 1462. There's a proliferation of standards going out now about what, because standardization, of course, is important. But which one should we watch? Why? Are they all going to converge? What are your thoughts on that? You have DX, which is a protocol. Deven, Polymath has the ST20. You guys also spearheaded 1400. You guys just introduced 1450. I don't know if you have affiliation to any of them yet, Timo.
I think
Or you're just
1460 is
watching all of
open.
them.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah,
1469.
Yeah.
No, but so we launched something that we call SRC20 tokens, which end of the day, look, this is like, I think Jamie put it, like you back into these standards as they evolve, and once you see like a winner emerge, then you back into that. And well, it's, and we look at ourselves as being supporting, Harbor and whatever going down the line, but the problem we're trying to solve is on a different level than at the smart contract level. We're trying to solve a problem that's above that. And all of the smart contracts that implement security tokens are going to have some kind of Oracle type function that's going to tell them to do, this or not do this. That's kind of where we'll end up, whatever you want to call it, DS or ST or whatever.
So let me ask you guys, why the hell do we need so many damn standards? Can you guys all get together, work together, come up with a new ERC and just work on one?
Things are so easy. It's like, why does the web, you have to look at like the history of this, right? So the way you actually do this is you deploy it, and as you deploy it, you learn. So all these other standards, they're not actually standards, they're proposals.
Correct.
And they're not deployed. Okay, so when we went and we deployed our protocol with a real marketplace, we learned a ton. We had to modify a ton of things and fix it. And so as you go down this road, you can't have a standard because you don't know what you need. And so you have to build it out. It will be initially kind of built. There's going to be 3 or 4 of them. A few marketplaces and exchanges will adopt them. And then whatever works will be adopted more broadly by everybody. But I mean, from our point of view, the amount of effort that it takes to go into building a standard like this versus actually deploying it and getting it live, we have real customers, right? I got to do this stuff for real. I'm not like you're talking about it theoretically.
Right. Yeah, no, but I mean, this is an issue because, I'm here talking to John at SharePost and he's like, damn it, which standard am I going to adopt? I'm there talking to T0 and they're like, which standard should we adopt? We got to adopt all of them. And I think to some point, Jamie's right in that, you can plan all you want, but, at the end of the day, it's, which standard ends up emerging being used is going to be useful.
We need stuff to trade.
But in the meantime, guys, please do me a favor. Go to 1400 and go talk about all the other standards. Go to all the other standards. Go talk about every other standard so we force them all to collaborate.
And when you're done, we will have done absolutely nothing.
And I say this, by the way, as one of the folks that introduced 1400. I don't care who wins. Just someone needs to just come up with something that works.
It also depends if you have existing business or not. If you're just a primary issuance platform that's come on, in StartEngine's point of view, we have partners that we've already working with. So we had to create something that would work within our ecosystem. I think the challenge is there's a place for the security token, the smart contract that'll exist on StartEngine on the primary issuance, but also hopefully on the secondary issuance with our ATS registration that's pending. But the real problem, or the real kind of what we need to solve is the secondary markets. How are they able to adopt all of the different standards that we're introducing?
But let me ask you a question. Do you think that T0 is going to adopt the StartEngine standard as their standard?
No, I think it's up to them to try to adopt all of the different security tokens and integrate them in their secondary markets. We don't. We would love to, but we don't.
But then a token that gets issued. This is just me talking about this, right? So then a token that gets issued on somebody who's an ATS. So we're not an ATS, right? We're not going to get in that space. So if you issue a token on another ATS, and we've had this conversation with Open Finance and others, If you're going to do that, then you have to get basically your competitor who's trying to trade against you to adopt your technology, which I think is challenging. I mean,
Well, we
it's
look
hard
at it
enough.
co-opetition, right? We want ATSs to work together, to have one buyer on one platform be matched on, let's say, a StartEngine secondary market. We want to join in that space. That's why we also have a broker-dealer pending as well. So we want to be involved in that, and we think of it as growing all of the secondary markets together instead of this tricky part of why would they adopt StartEngine ERC 1450?
Well, because they have to
tokens?
trade it, right? So if it's going to trade on other ones, then there is a lot of information that has to move between the two, and who controls the information? Like for us, our issuers frequently ask us, you know, who owns the data? And for us, it's really easy. You own the data, you're the issuer, I don't care.
This is
When
the
it, when
key
it comes to
thing.
the ATS, it's like a whole different thing.
Yeah.
You want to own the data because you want to market to those people. That's your business.
Yeah, but it's,
Right.
this is like, I don't think the smart contract or the token contract is like the complicated matter here. It's like, if you have enough volume and critical mass in your token or token standard, exchanges will implement it. We
Yeah.
saw that. It's already happened.
That's true,
We've
yeah.
already seen it. Like,
Yep.
you know, if Dash is big, then you support Dash in your exchange. And if you're C20, it happens to be a standard that actually, you know, allows a lot of other stuff to be created on top of it. And then it's like you can get listed for, you know, virtually 5 BTC as long as you adhere to ERC 20 or 1 BTC, whatever. But the thing is like the compliance data that sits on top of all of this and the customer bases or whitelist, whatever you want to call them, that are going to be like all these fragmented data repositories all over the place. That's a mess. So we created something called Market Access Protocol, which is a decentralized way of sharing accreditation information, for a better word, without disclosing personal data, and also without storing that data on chain. So that's kind of how we look at it. And it's basically a completely open initiative. We don't want to own it. As soon as you say, I'm going to own it, you're screwed, because that's not going to be the winner. So that's kind of how we approach it. And obviously, we implement it on Swarm, so we have 30,000 map-compliant wallets on Swarm right now. But that's just the start. And then we'll see where it goes. Like if we have a couple of, exchanges, ATSs in the US, a couple of European ones that adopt it, maybe that's a good mechanism. We'll see. It's early days.
Yep.
Yep, I promised that we'd leave time for questions. Are there any questions out in the audience at the moment? We have, okay, yeah, just wait for the mic.
Just quick question for Polymath. So you guys, when you first started Polymath, you guys did an ICO where you sold utility tokens to accredited investors and you did a bunch of airdrops. Is there any plan to convert that to a security token, or is it going to remain a utility token? What does the future of that look like?
I think there is a lot of kind of value and merit to what we did with creating a method of payment token, which is the Poly token. We're also kind of firm believers in the security token ecosystem. I think we may and probably should explore doing a security token offering at some point in the future, just to kind of eat our own dog food, so to speak. But I don't think that necessarily would or should imply it sort of impact the current method of payment token that we have on the network, which is Poly.
Yep. And in nuances, they are debatable, but they did a private SaaS offering, no ICO. They did an airdrop with AML KYC.
Yep.
Any other questions? Back there.
Okay, so take, for example, the process that I want to start a token. I want to also do an ICO. Once I convert my ICOs and give tokens, do I have to fall under new regulations or new things like KYC and whatnot for the tokens? Because ICOs not so much fall under the KYC from what I understand. Is that a misnomer, or I'm just trying to see like a simplistic process?
I would suggest you spend a few more minutes on kind of reading on the background of this. So, an ICO is a totally different animal. It has some very specific rules around it. I'm not sure about your points regarding accreditation, KYC, et cetera. And I would say also a security token offering is not a replacement for an ICO. It's a totally different product altogether. So, they're very different animals. I don't know if you guys want to add anything, but yeah.
Yep. So you can't actually look at it that way. I think that the problem is people started defining like your utility versus security, your ICO versus STL. And those are just terms of convenience, but that's not actually how the law works, right? So you can have utility and still be a security, right? So the question really is, does your token have utility or not? And to what degree of utility does it have? Now, separate question, in addition to that, is it a security or not? Now, it so happens that if you're doing an ICO, it's just initial coin offering. Anytime you're selling a coin in some sort of initial offering, it's an ICO. Now, that ICO itself could actually be a securities offering, regardless if it's a utility token or not. And then if it is, then theoretically, it's a security token offering at that moment, right? So it depends. Some people use the term security token offering to mean tokens that are clearly securities, like investment assets, collateral backed. Some people use security tokens to mean any type of token offering that happens to be a securities offering. So it depends how you use it, but in the US, as you may have heard, the SEC has taken a position that almost every type of ICO is essentially a STO. Is that helpful? All right, cool. I think there was a question in the middle right there.
Hi, I'm Alex from EverCity. So for now, security token is neither a proper security nor a speculative utility token. So who is the buyer then? And what's the portrait of the current buyer and the future buyer of security tokens? It's a question for everyone. Thank you.
So I think for StartEngine's purposes, and I think everyone here, a security token can represent actual equity that the company is offering. Therefore, the buyer would just be an investor that is interested in the business and what that company is looking to do. If you take the security token and just the token out of it, it's presumably a startup or a small business looking to raise capital. You can represent that equity on the blockchain using whatever smart contract protocol that you'd like, but having your equity in your company be represented by a digital token in hopes of it being more liquid on the secondary markets that we're talking about. That's kind of the point of the security token offering. So very much so, it would be a security under a security token offering, if that helps.
Well, we have it. We're at like in the other end of that scale, I think, where we observed very early that if you offer a fund that's representing redevelopment of properties in Puerto Rico because there was a hurricane there, and you have people in Puerto Rico that are interested in that property or that asset, and we tokenize that asset, that's relevant to them. And you can apply the same reasoning for across real estate, tech, impact investments, tokenizing whatever baskets of crypto or other financial instruments. It's really, it's almost like, who buys food, because everybody buys food. It's just like different things depending on, certain preferences.
Yeah, and it does, through Verify Investor, we see more accredited investors going through these deals than I think anyone else in the world really sees. But even though we focus on accredited investors, we see all the non-accredited investors are trying to get into deals too. I think it varies dramatically based on geographic, the type of deal, and geographically where they're marketing, the type of investors they tend to attract. It varies a lot, but the truth is, I think the market is still trying to figure out what the appropriate investor pool is going to be for each particular deal. It may match what are the type of investors that tend to invest in that asset class anyway, and then you'll have some crossover with the crypto investor. We are out of time, so thank you guys for sitting through this panel. Hope you found it helpful. Exit left.